Dr. David Lewis is an internationally known psychologist, consultant, and broadcaster.
For the past 20 years, consultant neuropsychologist Dr. David Lewis has been developing new techniques for enhancing all aspects of human performance, from athletic prowess to intellectual attainment. An award-winning broadcaster, David has written more than a dozen international bestsellers on enhancing human performance, including Thinking Better, Mind Skills, Secret Language of Success, Know Your Own Mind, Winning New Business, How to Get Your Message Across, and Information Overload, Practical Strategy for Surviving in the Modern Workplace. A fellow of both the Institute of Directors and the International Stress Management Association, David's pioneering work has been featured on television programs in the UK, Europe, the Far East, and the United States of America.
I'm a neuropsychologist. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means we study behavior through the actions of the brain. We look at how the brain operates, how it functions, its structure. And one of the ways we can do this is actually to go into operating theatres where they're performing surgery on the brain. Because there's a procedure in neurosurgery called, which some of you may have heard of, called an awake craniotomy. And in this procedure, you anesthetize the patient and you remove the portion of the skull over the part of the brain you want to investigate or operate on. And then you allow the anesthetic to lift so the patient becomes conscious. And that's possible because the brain is largely insensate. It can't experience pain. And from a psychological point of view, that's very interesting because the patient is able to respond to questions put to him or her by you as the operation is proceeding. And so you can get a lot of insight into how different parts of the brains, when they're stimulated, are actually functioning. Now, I remember on one occasion I was working in an operating theatre at a London hospital with a surgeon who was an extremely brilliant man, a very experienced, very brilliant man. But he was kind of like, I don't know if you remember, some of you remember Sir Lancelot Spratt, a character in the Doctor stories, played by James Watson Justice. Well, this was the kind of guy like that, if you remember that, like James Watson Justice on steroids. He was a brilliant man, but he was a most offensive fellow to deal with. His main technique for communicating with his team was through bullying and shouting. And on this occasion, everything that could go wrong in an operating theatre, short of actually killing the patient, had gone wrong. And you could see him building up to a huge eruption. And finally it came, and he said in a very loud voice, "Isn't any bastard in this team actually on my side?" And there was a sort of silence, embarrassed silence. And then we heard the patient say, in a plaintive yet very determined voice, "You can absolutely count on me, sir." We have to bear in mind we select out a tiny, tiny portion of the environment around us, which is incredibly rich, and we make our judgments on that. But what happens to this? I said 11 bits of information are actually dealt with per second by the brain, by the conscious part of the brain, and the rest doesn't go to waste. The rest is stored away below the level of the brain. There have been a lot of talk, so I'm sure you've attended conferences because it was a major topic for speakers. Left brain, right brain. Left brain, in most people, and most right-handed people, specialize for analytical reasoning. The language centers are in the left side of the brain. The right side of the brain specialized for fantasy and imagination and creativity. Well, all this is true to a degree, or not to the degree to which it was taken. But what is much more important is, rather than to look from left to right, is to dig down. Because the vast amount of information, if your mind knew a quarter of what your brain actually knows, then you'd be 10 times as clever and 100 times more successful.
Dr. David Lewis will provide for you a very individual and colourful presentation, a lively and informed item in your conference, a seminar or a 2-day training workshop. He provides the material and the entertainment which will catch and hold the audience's attention. As we said at the start of this video, unless you can win a person's heart, you're certainly not going to win their mind. Dr. David Lewis will give you the formula to achieve this success.